Chapter 5. Maybe we should have a proper talk then, the doctor suggests after we've settled in the cockpit. I told him the trip to Mars will take around 10 days, so we have some time to spare. He did remarkably well during our escape, but it seems he got through it on pure adrenaline and could use some distraction. His hands are shaking, but he's holding up. So, let's talk. I repeat everything that happened over the past 24 hours, this time in much more detail. Again, the doctor listens patiently. Okay, so, he replies when I'm finally done, I reckon you don't know about what happened on Earth then. The past years, I mean. I guess not. Between spending 7 years away from Earth and being dragged naked into a police station, I haven't had much time to catch up. What happened? Well, Istra, of course, but that's only the result of a much bigger movement. I should probably tell you about my field of study first. Go ahead. I lean back in my seat and stare outside into the darkness. I'm listening. 12 years ago, a small anomaly was observed at night in the UK near Sheffield. A super bright flash of light in the sky that most people assumed was a meteor of some sort. The flash was much brighter than any normal meteor though, so it piqued people's interest. It turns out it was indeed a meteorite the size of a melon. A group of scientists recovered it shortly after it fell, but meteorites these days aren't all that rare anymore. We recover close to 100 sizable ones every year in the UK alone. Most of them are tested for rare materials and processed accordingly. Now, given the unusual amount of light that came off of it, we decided to do some tests before processing it. The doctor has a pleasant voice to listen to, and hearing him speak has a soothing effect. My breathing slows down and I can finally find some rest after a couple of intense hours. Long story short, the doctor continues, this meteorite contained an unknown element, and that's where the Sheffield Institute of Interspatial Communication finds its origin. It wasn't called that at first, but you'll soon understand why. At first, I was recruited together with 2 other scientists to do testing on this newly found material, a chemist and a rocket scientist. Interestingly enough, the more tests we did on our sample, the more we realized it didn't adhere to the laws of physics as we know them. As an experiment, we heated a small part of the meteorite to observe how it behaved under high temperatures. Nothing happened. The next day, we wanted to conduct the same experiment again, so we recalibrated our measuring equipment and prepared for another test run. During our calibration, though, the equipment picked up all sorts of particle activity around the sample. We assumed this was a very delayed reaction to our previous experiment, so we noted the time and delay, reheated the sample, and came back the day after. Nothing happened. We were puzzled about this and brainstormed possible theories for these inconsistent observations. Eventually, we decided to retry the same experiment later that day, with 2 different sets of equipment. When we set up the new testing rig, they again picked up activity from yesterday's experiment, now with what seemed to be a longer delay. Throughout the next few days, we kept running experiments and taking measurements, and the timing never lined up, and for days we weren't able to find an answer for this odd behavior. It took a while, but eventually we did notice a pattern. Our measurements seemed to always occur at a random time after each experiment, but they did occur on a fixed time before the next experiment, always an hour before we heated the sample again. I give the doctor a confused look. I agree, he says in reply. It makes no sense. How could an experiment we were going to do influence the measurements of a past experiment? We did more test runs, but each time we moved the sample so that we had a more accurate understanding of which observation belonged to which experiment. It turned out that the past experiment had nothing to do with the current measurement. Each observation was consistent with the position of where the sample would be next. How? I stumble to find the right words because I'm not sure I understand what the doctor is saying. Hold on, we're getting there, he replies and continues. To make sure there weren't any biases, we'd have one team observe the readouts, while another team, those who hadn't seen the readouts, would move the sample. Next, we experimented with changing the temperature. Slight changes to it seemed to influence the delay. The more we heated the sample, the earlier its corresponding readout could be observed. Again, we had a blind team moving the sample at a random point in time to prevent any biases. All of this experimentation led to a conclusion. We believed we had discovered tachyons. I know enough physics to raise my eyebrows. I have heard of tachyons before, particles that travel faster than the speed of light. So the result of each experiment was measured before the experiment was done. I repeat, to let the words sink in. Exactly. So you mean the experiment went back in time? I wouldn't put it like that. No, but we can say the experiment's results were observed without being constrained by the natural flow of time. Hang on, weren't tachyons proven to not exist? I have a hard time believing what the doctor is implying. Well, it was never proven they don't exist. However, their existence would lead to paradoxes, and their behavior would be inconsistent with our current laws of physics. But no one managed to prove without a doubt they don't exist. So, are we talking time travel then? I would be hesitant to apply a term like time travel, because it has so many nuances and paradoxes that would distract from proper research. As an example, one experiment was about making an observation and then deliberately placing the sample in the wrong spot, so that the observation could not have taken place to create a paradox. What happened? Nothing. We weren't able to pick up any reading. It makes sense since we never actually put the sample in the right place. If we relied on a blind placement team once again, the readings only worked if they placed it in the spot we were observing. From our point of view, it seemed consistent. So then what? Well, eventually we concluded we didn't discover tachyons. Huh? The doctor smiles at my apparent confusion. Tachyons were theorized centuries ago as some kind of particle that travels faster than light. In theory, that could mean they would be able to send information back in time, which is what we were observing. However, we discovered 3 distinct kinds of particles, all exhibiting the same behavior, albeit with subtle differences between them. So, tachyons isn't an accurate term. We're also not sure whether the material we discovered is the source of these particles or merely a carrier for them. On top of that, we can't be certain whether they travel faster than the speed of light or not, because we simply cannot observe anything that's traveling at that speed. We can only observe a side effect that is theorized to be consistent with faster than light speed travel. We did call the host material tachyonium, though. It seemed fitting. It all sounds impressive, although I struggle to come up with practical uses. So, apart from it being a really cool discovery, can you actually do something with it? Would sending information back in time actually influence your current situation? Well, now we're getting into paradoxes. Let me tell you what happened next. After weeks of experiments, we noticed something peculiar. One of our tachyonium samples emitted what seemed to be controlled flashes of particles. Now, by this time, we were monitoring all our samples, so we were alerted of this activity immediately. What struck us most was that this particle sample was the so-called holotype sample. It was the first sample extracted from the meteorite that was used to determine whether this was in fact an unknown element. We never touched it afterwards, let alone experiment on it. This holotype was meant to be used as a baseline, so it should never show activity. Safe to say, when it did show a pattern, it grabbed our attention. The very distinct pattern also seemed to be more deliberate than just a random occurrence. It kept repeating. It seemed as if the holotype was trying to communicate some sort of message. We recorded all its data over the course of several days until we noticed full repetition. We managed to interpret that data, and to our astonishment, it included a message. What? Who? I struggle for words. Exactly, the doctor exclaims, smiling triumphant. We don't know where the message came from. We can only guess. The only thing we're sure of is that up until today, the holotype is still untouched, so the message must still have been sent somewhere from within the future. My best guess is that future us, or someone in the future, decided to use the holotype to communicate with us. So what did the message say? I ask, baffled. It included information about tachyonium that moved our research forward. The doctor remains rather vague, and I should probably ask more about it, but there are so many questions going through my head. So, future you sent a message to past you which influenced the situation of current you. Doesn't that mean that future you would have never sent any information at all? Isn't that something like the grandchild paradox? The grandfather paradox, the doctor corrects. And our situation is more commonly described as the bootstrap paradox, where information or an object needed to make time travel possible comes into existence thanks to time travel. It causes a circular dependency, hence time travel cannot be created. I need a moment to understand what the doctor is saying, but he continues. I agree with you that this is paradoxical, but the fact is that it happened. We have no way of communicating with the future us, since tachyonium only allows one-way communication into the past. Future us also never disclosed any information about who or what they are, so we can only guess about their motivations. Though I assume they try to limit the possibility of paradoxes as much as possible. But it's still a paradox, so it cannot be. Well, look at it from our reference point. We obtained information from an external party. All is fine. Time just moves on with that newly acquired information. The paradox only impacts the future reference point. What happened to them after the paradox was created? Will they simply stop existing? Will there be an alternate version of the future, a branch, so to speak? We don't know. And I don't think we can ever know. The only thing we can observe is that the same message kept repeating over and over again and continues to this day. So that's an argument that the alternate future still exists somewhere. Alternate? You mean like a multiverse? No, not really. For a multiverse you would need multiple material copies of the same universe. I don't believe that's the case here. We're only talking about time that's alternating. That's one dimension, not the other three. If we assume that time is an infinite dimension, one that we cannot perceive from our point of view, but one that's there nevertheless, then we might have found a way to navigate a small part of that dimension using tachyonium signals. We're not changing anything, we're only experiencing one slice of that time dimension, and we're moving through slices whenever a paradox is created. So don't think of it as multiple universes, think of it as multiple timelines within the same physical universe. But the existence of an infinite fourth time-like dimension does imply the existence of infinite variations of the other three dimensions as well, when combined with that fourth one. I'm not sure I fully get what the doc is saying, but my head is spinning, and I need a moment to gather my thoughts before diving deeper into it. Well, I give it to you, Doc. Your story is way more interesting than mine. He smiles and stares out the window into the darkness of space. Our stories might actually be more intertwined than you think, he continues while absently gazing into the universe, an abundance of stars dotting the blackness. Did you notice how those police shuttles mentioned that you are a wanted criminal, but also that the ship itself wasn't authorized to launch, or something like that? I nod. See, I don't think them chasing us is only about you helping criminals with your taxi services. I believe it's about your ship. What about it? See, the doctor hesitates for a second, gathering his thoughts. ISTRA is what allowed the UN to prosecute you. But ISTRA itself is one of the measures taken to prevent our research. After 3 years of working with tachyonium, we presented our findings to a special board of UN and USN members. They concluded that we weren't allowed to continue it any further. On top of that, they created ISTRA to prevent us from bringing this research into the practical field. How so? Well, they came up with creative ways to discourage or prevent near light-speed travel. It means we cannot get to the one place we need to be for our next breakthrough. At a random spot in deep space, at a very specific spot within the Oort cloud, 31,000 AU away, give or take. I already knew we were traveling far, but it's only right now that I realize how far. The Oort cloud, that's huge. What are you gonna do there? If you don't mind, I'll keep that information to myself until we've left Mars and are on our way. Once again, the doctor makes me uncomfortable. He's asking a lot of trust from me. What's in it for me? But I grimace as I'm reminded of my fate if I went back to Earth. Look, he says when he notices my worry. "I don't think I've given you any reason to doubt my intentions. I've told you everything I can at this point, and I'm more than happy to provide all the financial means needed to get us refueled and on our way. Once we're ready to go, I'll transfer your full payment, which you can check before we power up to full speed. You can still abort the mission at that point if you decide you cannot trust me. But I cannot take the risk of telling you where we're going or what we'll do there before we're certain we'll get there. I hope you understand." "I know. It makes sense," I say, "but it's of little comfort to me. You're basically saying my fate is in your hands. But I know I have no choice. And the doctor knows as well. So we turn towards the cockpit window and stare outside. The stars look fabulous. Our journey won't even make it halfway to our nearest neighboring star. That's how big space is. It makes me feel insignificant, but that's not a bad thing right now. The fewer eyes on me, the better."